are lawless, those camps, run by people smugglers, mainly Albanian and Kurdish. There's 2,000 or 3,000 people there, all of whom want to get to the UK. There's a lot of dangerous criminals. Someone pulled a knife on us. We got pelted with stones and bottles. The people there know that if they make it across the channel, they'll get a hotel, they'll get better work illegally. They're almost certain not to get kicked out. Well, there is one thing I do agree with the Labour cabinet on, and that is that Keir Starmer's clearly not up to the job, which is why pretty much every member of the shadow cabinet, as you've just listed, plus Andy Burnham, are after Keir Starmer's back with their daggers sharpened. I also think people here who are not British citizens, but who express racial or religious hatred, including antisemitism, or who express extremist views or support for violence or support for terrorism, should have their visas revoked and should be deported, because there is no place for that kind of extremism or hatred in this country.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Expresso. I'm Martyn Brown and we'll be standing in for JJ, who is back later in the week. Today I'm pleased to be joined by the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp, who may be known to some of you for the videos he has done with our investigations editor Zach Garner-Perkis on migrant camps in Calais and illegal camps on Park Lane. And that's where I'd like to start, Chris. We've had a record number of or increasing number of migrants coming into the country this year. We smashed through the 40,000 mark at the weekend. Last week we had high numbers coming in. Labour's approach isn't working, is it?
Well, it's completely failing. Labour has no control over our borders whatsoever. And Keir Starmer even admitted in a letter to President Macron a few weeks ago they have no deterrent. There is no deterrent whatsoever, because illegal immigrants coming into this country get put up in hotels at taxpayers' expense. Everything gets paid for. They can work in the illegal economy, and the chances of them getting kicked out are virtually zero. So there is no deterrent whatsoever. No wonder illegal immigrants across Europe end up flocking to Calais and then crossing the English Channel. Now, what is infuriating is there was a plan available that would have fixed this, the Rwanda deterrent, whereby every illegal immigrant arriving would have been removed to Rwanda, and common sense tells you that pretty quickly they would stop bothering to attempt the crossings. That plan was due to start just after the election in late July of last year, but what did Keir Starmer do? He cancelled it with no replacement, and as a consequence, numbers have surged. The
one in, one out scheme, as you alluded to, is just a waste of time and taxpayers' money. Can you ever see a situation where it gets any better under this government?
Not really. The one in, one out deal is ridiculous, because it's not one in, one out. It's about 10,000 people come in and about 50 go out. And obviously, if you've got a 99.5% chance of staying in the UK and only a 0.5% chance of getting removed, that is no deterrent, which is why the migrants have continued to cross, the illegal immigrants have continued to cross even after that deal started. In fact, I was out on the channel in a boat the day that deal came into force, and I saw 3 or 4 migrant boats. I spoke to migrants in Calais after that, and they completely dismissed it and said they planned to cross anyway. I don't think the Labour government are going to fix this, because they want to stay inside the ECHR, and as long as you're inside the ECHR, it's essentially impossible to properly police our borders. And that's why, although my new opposite number, the second Home Secretary that I'm facing, Shabana Mahmood, she talks a good game, I'll give her credit, she communicates well, she comes up with announcements, but it won't actually change anything, and we'll be sitting here in a year's time and the problem will be just as bad.
Some people are raving about her. She's got tougher rhetoric than her predecessor. You're not a fan?
Listen, rhetoric won't fix the problem. So yeah, I said she's a good communicator, but rhetoric is not going to solve our border problem. We've seen Home Secretaries in the past that have employed tough rhetoric, but without fixing the border. I mean, Yvette Cooper was in that category as well. Tough rhetoric is not going to secure our borders. It needs tough action, and we're not going to see that from this Labour government, and we're not going to see it from Shabana Mahmood either.
You're a bit of an action man. You were out on a boat, as you say. You were in Calais with Zach, and on the videos you were had bottles thrown at you, and I think you were threatened with a knife at one point. Could you tell us a bit more about that? And instead of the rhetoric, should Shabana Mahmood get herself over to Calais and do the sorts of things that you've been doing?
I think she should follow in my footsteps, get on the ground in Calais, visit the migrant camps like I did in August, and see what's going on. And what is going on is they are lawless, those camps, run by people smugglers, mainly Albanian and Kurdish. There's 2,000 or 3,000 people there, all of whom want to get to the UK. There's a lot of dangerous criminals. in that camp. As you say, someone pulled a knife on us. We got pelted with stones and bottles. And the people there know that if they make it across the channel, they'll get a hotel. They'll get better work illegally. They're almost certain not to get kicked out. And it was pretty alarming, to be honest, and quite scary. I also observed the French police doing basically nothing. When we went to the camp, there were no police anywhere in sight. The police were making no effort to clear or control the camp. And it was even worse than that, because when it came to the migrants leaving the camp to get to the places where the boats embark, the French police were actually ushering them, helping them onto the buses, which were heading in the direction of the embarkation points. And, I also went along the beach where the embarkations may often go from, a place called Gravelines. It's just next to a big nuclear power station. And I was going up and down the beach, and there were no French police patrolling it at all, even though it's a notorious place for migrants to embark. So the French police are doing basically nothing. We certainly can't rely on them.
Why is that? Is that the message coming down from the Macron government, or is it that just French police are lazy? What is it? Why are they not doing anything?
I think there's an element of indifference. They don't really probably care that much about the embarkations. Certainly President Macron has not given permission to take the action needed. I mean, if they were really serious about stopping this, the French would be intercepting boats near the shore just after they left. Be very easy to do. They go very slowly, about 3 miles an hour. Be very easy to intercept those boats at sea near the shore, and that would stop it pretty much immediately, because if the boats didn't get through, nobody would bother crossing. But unfortunately, the French are not doing that. What they actually do at sea is they usher the boats across to the median line, where French territorial waters meet UK territorial waters, and then Border Force pick them up. So the French and British authorities are essentially providing an escort service and then a taxi service for illegal immigrants, and I think that should stop as well.
Now, voters, or a number of voters, would say that you had your chance. You were in government for 14 years. You could have left the ECHR. I know you were bringing through the Rwanda policy, and the election got in the way of that. But what would you say to voters who say you've had your chance and you missed it?
Well, we're under new leadership now. Kemi Badenoch was never Prime Minister before. I was never Home Secretary previously.
You were both in government. You were both ministers.
Yeah, but neither of us was Prime Minister or Home Secretary, and the decisions about this get taken at the top of government. And we now have a different approach. We recognise that mistakes were made in the past. We recognise the situation is totally unacceptable. And we also recognise that to fix this, you've got to take extremely tough radical action. There's not a nice way or an easy way of fixing this problem. That's why we would come out of the ECHR. We thought about it carefully. We didn't rush into that decision. We thought about it carefully. We got a top KC, David Wolfson, to write an opinion explaining, firstly, the need to come out. Do we need to? Yes, we do, he says. And then how we can come out. We've done the thinking. Unlike, for example, reform that just shoots from the hip and doesn't do the thinking, we've got a proper plan. And coming out of the ECHR would enable us to, for example, deport every illegal immigrant who arrives within a week of their feet touching down on UK soil without any kind of court process or judicial interference. But you've got to leave the ECHR in order to do that.
What worries you most about the migration crisis? We had the situation with Epping in the summer. Do you fear that there could be other situations like that if we don't really get a grip of this in the immediate future?
Well, those situations are happening. I mean, the illegal immigration into this country has unleashed a crime wave. Reporting by various journalists has shown that there are hundreds and hundreds of criminal offences being committed by illegal immigrants. Some of the nationalities coming across, for example, Eritrean and Afghan men. The people crossing, by the way, are almost entirely young men. They are about 20 times more likely to commit sex offences than average. We've seen some horrendous cases. I mean, one woman working in a hotel got murdered by one of the illegal immigrants staying in the hotel. There was 3 men have been charged. Again, illegal boat immigrants have been charged with gang raping a woman on Brighton Beach, 2 Egyptian, 1 Iranian. There was the case just last week of 2 Afghan men who raped a 15-year-old girl in a park in the Midlands. Another woman got raped in Hyde Park by an Egyptian illegal immigrant living in an asylum hotel. The list goes on and on and on. This isn't just a border security crisis. It is a public safety crisis, and women and girls are especially at risk.
The irony is with this that the longer it goes on, it plays into the hands of reform, because voters will think, well, reform are the only ones who can sort this problem out. Are you concerned by that? We've got elections coming up in May.
Look, I think the truth is that the public are angry about this border security crisis, and the public are right to be angry. Labour are clearly not fixing it, and I acknowledge the last government didn't take the steps necessary to end this. But we have, as I say, new leadership and a new plan. And our plan is detailed. We published it at the party conference. If people want to look it up, it's called the Borders Plan. Reform don't have a credible plan. Well, they do have a good slogans, I'll give them that. And Nigel Farage is a charismatic leader. But they don't have a detailed, credible plan for fixing this. The only party with a detailed, credible plan to sort this out is the Conservative Party. We've done the work. I've been over there on the ground. I haven't seen Nigel Farage in that camp, by the way. I haven't seen Nigel Farage publishing a detailed and credible plan. We're the only party that have done those things. And I think when the electorate come to make their choice in 3 years' time, that is going to be something on their mind. The public are going to want credible plans, not just slogans.
The other thing on legal migration is under the so-called Boris wave, net migration skyrocketed. It's starting to come down now. How can you justify what went on under Boris Johnson's government and subsequent governments to voters, and Labour seem to be having some success with that, bringing numbers down?
Well, firstly, I can't justify it. It was completely wrong. Those numbers should never have been anything like that high. And
why were they? Why did they go so high?
I think because the rules were, set at the time, this is like 4 or 5 years ago, in a way that was just too soft. Now, that was a huge mistake. And there were some changes. So the reduction more recently, in the last couple of years, actually has nothing to do with Labour. It's because the Conservatives, just at the end of their time in government, tightened up the rules. Now, it happened, in my view, too late, but the rules were tightened. They were tightened a bit in April 2023 and even more in April 2024. And for example, the salary thresholds were increased. You couldn't bring in dependents like family members if you're studying or working on the social care visa. A whole load of changes like that. All the salary thresholds got increased as well. And that has meant numbers have dropped dramatically over the last 2 years. But to be honest, they need to drop even further. And that's why we need to have binding limits set by Parliament, voted on in Parliament. So never again can the numbers get that high. And I would want to set those thresholds, those numbers very, very low. So we had minimal legal migration, a small number of people very highly skilled, people working in scientific research, in the city, in the technology sector, that kind of thing. So if they're very high skilled and very highly paid, like fine, no problem. But mass low skilled migration has to end. People bringing in, thousands and thousands or tens of thousands even of family members, that has to end as well. It's gone on too far. It's got to stop. It's not just bad. It's bad for the economy because people working on low wages take out more than they contribute. But it's also bad for social cohesion as well because this mass immigration, there hasn't been integration. There's 1 million people here who don't speak English properly. It's completely wrong.
2025 has been a pretty tumultuous year in politics. 2026 could be even more tumultuous. Andy Burnham, Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, Shabana Mahmood. Who do you think is going to replace Keir Starmer?
Well, there is one thing I do agree with the Labour cabinet on, and that is that Keir Starmer's clearly not up to the job, which is why pretty much every member of the shadow cabinet, as you've just listed, plus Andy Burnham, are after Keir Starmer's back with their daggers sharpened. And instead of fixing our country's problems, they're competing with each other to take over from him. The truth is, though, whichever of them takes over, when Starmer is inevitably kicked out, is going to be just as left-wing, maybe even more left-wing than Keir Starmer. They're still going to be in hock to the Parliamentary Labour Party, to Labour MPs, who are extremely left-wing, more left-wing than much more left-wing than Labour voters, definitely more left-wing than the public. And it means that any Labour Prime Minister, whoever it is going to be unable to do things like take tough action to fix the borders or get welfare expenditure down. I mean, Keir Starmer wasn't even able to get through relatively modest changes over the summer. So it doesn't really matter who takes over from Keir Starmer. They're either going to be more left-wing inherently, like Angela Rayner, or they're going to be unable to take the steps needed because their own MPs won't let them. And we've seen that a couple of times already. We saw it with the welfare reforms last summer. We've seen it with the 2-child benefit cap, which they've got rid of under pressure from Labour MPs. And it doesn't matter if Wes Streeting or someone takes over, he'll be in the same position.
I know she doesn't
just slightly more charming.
I know she doesn't do early morning dining, but Kemi will eat them for breakfast, won't she? Any of them?
I think she will, and she's eating Starmer for breakfast now. I mean, we've seen at PMQs in the last few months, Kemi absolutely leaving Starmer on his back on the floor. She was led the way on Angela Rayner having to resign. Within 24 hours of her exposing the Peter Mandelson scandal, Mandelson was gone. Her budget response, I think, was brilliant against Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves couldn't accuse Kemi of mansplaining. So she's performing really well. And whoever Labour decide to replace Keir Starmer with, I think Kemi will eat them for breakfast as well.
There's 6 months to go until May elections, pretty crucial elections. Do you need to start winning to show that the party's moving in the right direction?
Well, I think we've seen the polls getting better in the last few weeks. We've seen Kemi's personal approval ratings getting better. I think she now has better approval ratings than Nigel Farage, for example. But look, we're still less than 2 years since the general election, and next May we're going to be less than 2 years. It's still pretty soon after what was a bad election defeat for us, for reasons I understand. I mean, I get why we lost, and we need to, we have learned already the lessons from that. It does take time to rebuild. That process is going to carry on. But I think, as you said, Kemi is the person who is leading the attacks on this terrible Labour government, and the public are noticing that. And the public are also noticing we're the ones with credible policies, whether it's on the economy, getting welfare down, cutting taxes like abolishing stamp duty, a plan for the borders. We're the only party with those credible plans, and over time, I expect that to get kind of reflected in election results.
On Sunday, Australia was rocked by the news of a deadly mass shooting after 2 gunmen opened fire on a group of people celebrating the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, killing 15. Among those dead include Holocaust survivor Alexander Kleitman and London-born rabbi Eli Schlanger. The youngest victim of the attack was only 10 years old. Are Jewish people safe in the UK?
Well, I think the Jewish community here in the UK and worldwide are deeply concerned about their safety. We saw the tragic murder at the Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester just a few weeks ago. Now this terrible, terrible terrorist atrocity in Australia. My friends in the Jewish community say they feel unsafe coming into the centre of London when the pro-Palestine protests are happening. They say they feel unsafe wearing signs of Judaism like a skullcap or a Star of David. My friends in America who thinking of coming here to visit ask if they'll be safe. Jewish friends ask if they'll be safe in London. So the Jewish community feel deeply uneasy, and I can understand why, because anti-Semitism has surged in the last 2 years. We've seen a terrorist and Islamist extremist murder in Manchester that I mentioned a minute ago. So it's clear to me the government needs to do a lot more on this issue to protect the Jewish community and eradicate the stain of anti-Semitism. Because these atrocities, like the murders, the terrorist murders in Australia, or the murders in Manchester a few weeks ago, are the result of growing anti-Semitism and extremism in society. And there needs to be zero tolerance of that. Now that means, for example, having zero tolerance for what are essentially anti-Semitic incitements to violence, like calling for a global intifada or calling for jihad. We've seen pro-Palestine protesters saying those chants on the streets of London, even in the last few days, and I think that's unacceptable. I don't think that should be allowed, because it is essentially an incitement to violence, which ultimately leads to murders like these. I also think people here who are not British citizens but who express racial or religious hatred, including anti-Semitism, or who express extremist views or support for violence or support for terrorism, should have their visas revoked and should be deported, because there is no place for that kind of extremism or hatred in this country.
Dale Vince has tweeted over the weekend implying that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is to blame for a global upsurge in anti-Semitism. He said Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. Do you think Keir Starmer should condemn what Dale Vince, who is a major Labour donor, has said?
Yes, Keir Starmer should condemn him unreservedly and demand that Dale Vince apologises publicly. What Dale Vince tweeted was frankly disgusting. He was insinuating that this vile anti-Semitic terrorist murder in Australia was somehow the fault of the Israeli government. The only people who are to blame for those vile terrorist murders are the perpetrators and the anti-Semites who support them. What Dale Vince tweeted was disgusting. Keir Starmer should have the moral courage to come out and publicly condemn what this man, who is a major Labour donor, has said.
Now we're moving on to Philp the man. I notice that you're wearing an aura ring there. You've told me in the past, actually, that you have a very low resting heart rate. Can you tell our viewers more about that? What is your heart rate?
My heart rate, my resting heart rate. Well, it's been down as low as about 40. It sort of depends on general fitness and that kind of thing. So it's between 40 and 50, but it has been as low as 40.
That's Olympic athlete standard, isn't it?
I'm not sure. I don't know about that.
What do you do to keep so fit?
So I mean, I run quite a lot. I try and play football in Croydon when I can, and I started doing 125 press ups each morning, and getting on for 100 sit ups and squats as well as an every morning routine. In addition to a couple of runs, gym session, and when I have time, which is less these days, but when I have time, some football in Croydon as well.
I remember last year doing a story. You had a black eye from football.
I did,
didn't you?
Inflicted by my own goalkeeper. We both went for the same ball, and he tried to punch the ball out of the box. I tried to head it out, and unfortunately, we both missed the ball, and his fist connected with my face, leaving a black eye, which then got commented on because I was doing a morning media round the next day, and everyone asked why I had a black eye. And the answer is I got it playing football in Croydon.
And I mean, I see you getting quite vexed in PMQs, shouting at Starmer and heckling. You're one of the chief hecklers, Tory hecklers. Your aura ring must be buzzing, but at that moment. But what do you do to kind of relax in your spare time, getting away from the cut and thrust of Westminster, other than the exercise routine?
I mean, the heart rate is definitely not 40 to 50 in PMQs. No. I get so annoyed by Starmer, who just constantly makes excuses, blames other people for his failures. When he's really in trouble about the terrible mistakes his government has made, he starts going on about Liz Truss. I mean, he's the Prime Minister, he's running the country. He's the one putting taxes up and letting welfare spending out of control. He's the one who's got no control of our borders. And when he just tries to, doesn't answer the question or makes some pathetic excuse or even says stuff that's just not true, it annoys me, and I'm unable to restrain myself. So I do shout at him across the Commons, and I get sometimes told off by the Speaker when my enthusiasm gets the better of me. But in terms of trying to zone out a bit, I like the mountains. I like going walking or climbing in the Alps or the Dolomites, that kind of thing. When time allows, that's a good way of just trying to clear the head a little bit.
And have you got much time off for Christmas, or has Kemi cracked the whip and you got you working all the way through?
We're always, well, there'll be some time off, but we're always busy working on new ideas and new policies. Like I said earlier, we're the only party doing the detailed work, and that will continue over Christmas as well.
And a couple of things for the new year. Can you see off reform?
Yeah, I think we can, because they haven't got credible policies. They've got slogans, but their ideas are dreamt up in a pub and written on the back of a fag packet, if they're written down at all, and then they don't stand up to scrutiny. When journalists ask questions or other politicians ask questions, they don't have any answers. And the public, I think, ultimately are not going to want to elect a government that doesn't have a credible plan. And that's going to be the difference between us at the next election, between us and Reform. We'll have similar objectives, but we're going to have a credible plan to deliver them.
The Tory party in my lifetime has never been more united. There were obviously there was some suggestions that Robert Jenrick wanted the top job, but that seems to have subsided this autumn. Not something that you fancy in the future, or do you want to be Tory leader?
I'm very happy supporting Kemi, who's doing a fantastic job. I'm very focused on getting her elected as Prime Minister and becoming Home Secretary. Right,
the caffeine has worn off, and that's all we've got time for. Thanks for watching the Daily Expresso. Join us again tomorrow at the same time.